So not too long ago, the luxury fashion market was in a bit of a panic. Their prominence was waning and they really didn't know what to do. So they had to turn to the one market that for years they looked down on to actually help revitalize them. So let's talk about how streetwear saved the fashion luxury market next here on Making the Brand. What's up, everybody? Rob Norman here from Planet Brooklyn Academy, and this is Making the Brand, the series where I give you a little insider knowledge on how to start a clothing line, and if you already have one, how to make it better. As always, please hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with everything I drop when it drops. And you already know we are in the 100K gain challenge. We are trying to get this channel up to 100,000 subscribers. So tell a friend to help us get up there. I know we are a ways away from actually hitting that number, but I believe we can do it. I think we can do it in a year. So again, let people know, tell them about the channel, help us get up there so I can help you guys in exchange and help you guys build better brands and, be able to do consultations for free with you guys once we hit that 100K. But that's the goal. Let's make it happen. Now, on to story time. So how does streetwear help save the luxury fashion market? Well, before I even start talking about that, I think it's best that we go back and look at the past and how things got started. So let's go back to like the mid 80s, early 90s. And during this time, we're in a period where there was a huge disconnect between the upper class and lower class. And the fact is that there was a lot of money going on and being made during that time, but it was mostly made by the wealthy. And there was a huge wealth gap going on. And everybody else was just kind of making it, getting by. And the luxury brands were being very elite during that time. They did not want you in their clothing if you could not afford it. And during this time, you're looking at the surgence of hip hop. And hip hop artists wanted great clothing, wanted that luxury look. So they turned to a man called Dapper Dan, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And Dapper Dan had a store up in Harlem. And I grew up during this time, so I remember Dapper Dan. I remember every hip hop artist having all their clothing made by him. And what Dapper Dan was doing, he was taking the clothing that he was designing and he was using a lot of the luxury brands logos on the clothing, because if they didn't want the artists in them, he was going to make the same designs but yet use their logos. So if you go back and look at a lot of videos from the 80s, early 90s, you'll see a lot of hip hop artists wearing stuff that had MCM in it, Gucci, Louis Vuitton logos in it, but they weren't authorized designs. They were all stuff that Dapper Dan created. Now, eventually, they would go after Dapper Dan and have him shut down, and they stopped making it. But at this point, hip hop artists felt that if you don't want us in your stuff, we're going to make our own stuff. And hence the birth of urban fashion, which was the precursor to streetwear. So now we had all these urban brands that were being born, and we're talking about late 80s, early 90s, and so on, where we started having the birth of these urban fashion brands. And we're wearing them, and everything is great. But what you have to also realize is that during this time, you're looking at a demographic between the ages of 18 and 25 that was able to afford the fashions that were coming out for urban fashion. But luxury brand was still something that was too expensive. So anyone between the demographic of 18 and 25 that can afford luxury was normally one or two people. Either one, they were in the drug game, or two, they were an artist, a hip hop artist, or they were an actor or something of that nature, able to afford that. But everybody else was not able to afford that. So this is why urban fashion was more accessible to them. Now, even though the luxury brands did not like catering to the urban market, they didn't have a problem taking from it. So they definitely would steal ideas and use it in their stuff and use it in their fashion shows. So they really appropriated a lot of stuff for it, but yet did not want to be associated or bothered with the urban market. Now, also what was going on during that time, you have to think about the people who were able to afford luxury brands who were not in that demographic of 18 to 25 were people who were older. So you're talking about people in their mid 30s, 40s, 50s who had been in jobs for long periods of times. A lot of corporate worked their way up, and they were starting to make significant amount of money, so they were able to afford luxury brands. But those people were way separated from the younger demographic who didn't have that money, had to rely on urban fashions to fulfill that void. Now, fast forward to 2010s. We're in the 2010s, and this is the time where streetwear is running, it's running things. It is at its full speed at this point. And around the 2010s is also when streetwear starts to go through another change. Streetwear is starting to go into what I like to call street luxe. You're starting to see the birth of brands like Off-White and Kith. Those brands are starting to come up, and they're starting to be a little more designery, not so graphic driven, and the designs are getting much cleaner. And this is where the luxury brands started to panic, because what they're noticing is that now streetwear is not so much of a inner city thing, but now it's reaching into the other markets of older demographics who want that kind of clean look but still hip market. Also, what's happening is that same demographic that I talked about in the 80s, the 18 to 25 that couldn't afford the luxury brands, well, in the 2010s, that same demographic of 18 to 25 is making 10 times what they were making in the 80s. You have more millionaires between the ages of 18 and 25 in the 2010s than you ever had in the 80s and early 90s. So they have a lot of disposable income. And what are they spending it on? They're spending on the brands that they grew up with, the brands that they recognize. So it is the Off-Whites, it is the Kiths, but they're not spending so much with the luxury brands. And that's because the luxury brands spend so much time turning their nose up at urban and streetwear and try to only appease their market, which their market at this time in the 2010s are now in their 60s and 70s. So their market is getting very small because a lot of these people are passing away. A lot of these people aren't shopping the way they used to be. So they realize that they're losing a huge demographic market. They're not making the money they were making once before. But now there's a younger market that's coming up that is now taking over what they used to once run. So what do? They realize that the only way we can survive is that we now have to become part of this streetwear market. And the first thing I noticed was when Louis Vuitton decided to do a collaboration with Supreme. When they did that collaboration, it showed that they finally woke up and realized that they can't do this without streetwear. And again, when you looked at the suitcase that they did and limited skateboards and everything, this was something brand new. Mind you, they also knew that most of the younger generation who was in the streetwear market were not aware of how the luxury brands treated the urban markets back in the days. They didn't know nothing about that. So they didn't realize that they didn't want to be a part of it. So they were able to shift and act as if they were a friend to the streetwear market. And they got accepted. And a lot of these brands started to bring them in. And what you notice is that suddenly all these luxury brands are doing collaborations with streetwear brands. They're doing collaborations with sneakers and everything else. And suddenly luxury brand is starting to expand again. Now they're not dying. They're starting to get more shoppers in their stores that are of a younger demographic. But that's not where they ended, because it's great to do collaborations and you're getting eyes on your brand, but they had to go one step further. If you really want to get into the market, you need to pull the market over to you. And how do they do that? They decided that we need to go and poach one of their best designers and make them creative director. And that's what they did. When Louis Vuitton went and got Virgil to become their creative director. Now, Virgil is very talented, but this was a strategic move. Strategic in the fact that they knew that Virgil was hot at the moment. He was on fire. He had Off-White. He was doing the Nike collaborations. He was selling through the roof with everything he touched. And they realized that if you want that market, if we bring him in as creative director, everybody who follows him and shops with his brands are now going to buy everything that we do because he's now designing for us. And again, nothing wrong with that. That actually was a brilliant move. And it did put more eyes on the luxury market. And in turn, after his unfortunate passing, they went and got Pharrell, another one who is a titan in the market. His following and everything and his influence in the market is huge. It made sense to go and grab him. And other brands started doing the same thing. Kenzo went and got Nigo from Bape to now become their creative director. Everybody realized that this is the way to go, because as long as you have these pioneers on your squad, everybody else who follows them is now going to follow and shop with you. And now you've noticed the shift, that suddenly luxury markets are so hip and part of what's going on of the current times. And they haven't stopped. There is new blood in these luxury brands. And now they're realizing that the money is not just with the elites. The money is with the younger market and everywhere else. So this is why you now see them in streetwear. You also see them in the gaming market. You see them in the metaverse. They see where all the money is potentially being made, and they realize it's not with just the 1%. They're realizing that now that wealth gap that there was back in the 80s is so much smaller. That now there's more money going around because of content creators and things like that are making money. So now it makes sense now to reach back and go into these areas and partner with them. And this is how streetwear saved the luxury market. And again, it was something that they had to realize, because if they did not get on this train, they were going to be left behind. And they saw a juggernaut of new gods coming up in brands that were about to take them over and put them out to pasture. So they knew that either you join it or get left behind. And they joined it. And luckily it helped them in a big way. So that's my story of how the luxury brand was saved by streetwear. I hope this was informative as usual. Again, any thoughts or comments you have, please leave them down below. I love to read them. And also, if you have not picked up my book yet, Making the Brand, the link is down below. Get it. It is very informative. It helps show you how to basically start your clothing brand the proper way. So on that note, I will catch you all on the next episode. So have a great day, and I'll catch you later. Peace.